HOA Karen attacks U.S. Army colonel. Gets shocked when she calls Pentagon. For years, the residents of Oakwood Estates lived under the watchful eye of their homeowners association president, a woman known simply as Karen. Her reign over the neighborhood was absolute, her word law. To the outside world, she was the guardian of property values and community standards. To those who lived under her rule, she was a tyrant. Karen's day typically began at dawn. She would emerge from her meticulously maintained colonial-style home, clipboard in hand, ready to document any and all infractions against her ever-growing list of rules and regulations. No blade of grass was too short, no mailbox too crooked to escape her scrutiny. "I remember the day I got a notice for having my garbage can visible from the street," recalls Sarah Thompson, a longtime resident. "It was 6:05 a.m. Pickup was at 6 a.m. I had overslept by 5 minutes, and there it was, a bright yellow violation notice stuck to my front door." But it wasn't just the petty infractions that made Karen's rule so oppressive. It was the way she wielded her power, the casual cruelty with which she forced her will upon the neighborhood. Mark Rodriguez, another resident, shares his experience. "My daughter was selling lemonade to raise money for her school trip. Within 10 minutes, Karen was there, demanding to see a business license. She threatened to call the police if we didn't shut it down immediately. My little girl was in tears." As weeks turned into months, and months into years, Karen's grip on the community tightened. She installed security cameras throughout the neighborhood, ostensibly for everyone's safety. In reality, they were tools for her to monitor the comings and goings of every resident. "It felt like we were living in a prison," says Emily Chen, a newer resident. "I couldn't even have friends over without Karen questioning who they were and how long they planned to stay. It was suffocating." Karen's tactics escalated. Threats of fines turned into actual financial penalties. Warnings became eviction notices. The community lived in fear, never knowing when they might fall afoul of her arbitrary rules. "I've lived through wars," says retired veteran Frank Miller, his voice heavy with emotion. "But I've never felt as powerless as I did living under Karen's thumb. It was psychological warfare, pure and simple." The situation seemed hopeless. Many residents considered moving, but the housing market was tough, and Karen's reputation had spread to neighboring communities, making it difficult to sell. Then, on a warm summer day in 2024, a moving truck pulled up to number 17 Oakwood Drive. The house had been empty for months, its previous owners having fled in the night, unable to bear Karen's tyranny any longer. As the movers unloaded boxes and furniture, a sleek black car pulled into the driveway. The door opened, and out stepped a woman in an impeccably pressed military uniform. Her posture was ramrod straight, her gaze steady and confident. This was Colonel Naomi Campbell, decorated U.S. Army officer, veteran of multiple tours, and Oakwood Estate's newest resident. As she surveyed her new home, Karen watched from across the street, her eyes narrowing. Little did either woman know that their inevitable confrontation would shake the foundations of Oakwood Estates and change the lives of its residents forever. In the days that followed, the neighborhood held its collective breath. The unstoppable force of Karen's will was about to meet the immovable object of Colonel Campbell's integrity. And in the clash that was to come, the true meaning of community, justice, and the American dream would be put to the test. What happened next? Well, that's where our story truly begins. Before we continue, tell us where you're watching from in the comments section. And don't forget to like, comment, and hit the subscribe button for more of these gripping stories. Colonel Naomi Campbell's military career was nothing short of exemplary. With over 20 years of service, multiple combat tours, and a chest full of medals, she had risen through the ranks to become one of the most respected leaders in the U.S. Army. Her reputation for fairness, strategic thinking, and unwavering integrity had earned her the admiration of both superiors and subordinates alike. After decades of moving from base to base, Naomi decided it was time to put down roots. She chose Oakwood Estates, a picturesque suburban community known for its manicured lawns, tree-lined streets, and tight-knit neighborhood feel. On the surface, it seemed like the perfect place to call home. However, beneath the polished exterior of Oakwood Estates lay a community gripped by fear and resentment. At the center of this tension was Karen Whitman, the iron-fisted president of the Homeowners Association. Karen's reign over Oakwood Estates was marked by a relentless pursuit of what she deemed community standards. Karen's history of harassment and micromanagement was well documented among the residents. She had a penchant for issuing fines for the most trivial of infractions. Sarah Thompson, a longtime resident, recalled receiving a violation notice for having her garbage can visible from the street at 6:05 a.m., just 5 minutes after the scheduled pickup time. But Karen's overreach didn't stop at petty fines. She had installed security cameras throughout the neighborhood, ostensibly for safety, but used them to monitor residents' movements. Emily Chen, a newer homeowner, described feeling like she was living in a prison, unable to have friends over without Karen questioning their presence and duration of stay. Karen's tactics escalated over time. She began issuing threats of eviction to those who dared to challenge her authority. Mark Rodriguez shared a particularly distressing incident where Karen threatened to call the police on his young daughter for running a lemonade stand without a business license. As Karen's power grew unchecked, the community's spirit withered. Longtime residents considered moving, but the housing market was tough, and Karen's reputation had spread, making it difficult to sell. The atmosphere in Oakwood Estates had shifted from neighborly to fearful, with residents walking on eggshells to avoid Karen's wrath. How long could Karen's tyranny continue unchecked, and who would be brave enough to stand up to her? Little did Karen know her reign of terror was about to meet its match in the form of Colonel Naomi Campbell, a woman who had faced far more formidable adversaries than a power-hungry HOA president. The tranquility of Oakwood Estates was shattered one sunny afternoon when Karen, clipboard in hand, marched up to Colonel Naomi Campbell's front door. The supposed infraction? A potted plant on the porch that Karen deemed non-conforming to HOA standards. As Naomi opened the door, Karen launched into a tirade. "You people never learn, do you?" She spat, her face contorted with anger. "I've told you 100 times about unauthorized decorations." Naomi, taken aback by the hostility, remained composed. "I'm sorry, but I don't believe we've met. I'm Colonel Naomi Campbell, and I just moved in last week." Karen's eyes narrowed. "I don't care if you're the Queen of England. Rules are rules, and you're breaking them." As Karen's voice rose, neighbors began to peek out their windows, drawn by the commotion. Naomi, drawing on years of military training and conflict resolution, attempted to de-escalate the situation. "I understand you're concerned about the neighborhood's appearance," Naomi said calmly. "Perhaps we could discuss this civilly and review the HOA guidelines together." Karen, however, was beyond reason. Enraged by Naomi's composure, she lashed out, knocking the potted plant off the porch. It shattered on the sidewalk, scattering soil and ceramic shards. "There, now it's in compliance," Karen sneered, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Naomi's eyes widened, but she maintained her cool demeanor. "Ma'am, I must ask you to leave my property immediately. This behavior is unacceptable." Karen, fueled by her own fury, stepped closer, jabbing a finger at Naomi's chest. "Listen here, you." "You?" She hesitated, then spat out a racial slur that made the onlooking neighbors gasp. Naomi's jaw tightened, but she didn't flinch. "I'm going to ask you one more time to leave. If you don't, I'll have no choice but to call the authorities." Karen laughed, a harsh, mirthless sound. "Go ahead, call them. I run this neighborhood, and they know it. And let me tell you something else." She leaned in, her voice low and menacing. "I know all about your kind. If you think you and your family are going to be comfortable here, think again. We have ways of dealing with people who don't fit in." The threat hung in the air, heavy and ominous. Naomi's eyes flashed with a mixture of anger and determination. She had faced down enemies in war zones, but never expected to encounter such blatant hostility in her own front yard. With tensions at a boiling point, how would Colonel Campbell respond to this blatant attack on her and her family? The neighborhood held its collective breath, waiting to see what would happen next. Colonel Naomi Campbell took a deep breath, her military training kicking in as she faced the seething Karen. With a calm that belied the gravity of the situation, Naomi spoke, her voice steady and authoritative. "Mrs. Whitman, I want you to listen carefully. Your actions today constitute harassment, property damage, and what could be classified as a hate crime. As a serving officer in the United States Army, I am obligated to report this incident to my superiors at the Pentagon." Karen's face, flushed with anger moments ago, suddenly drained of color. The Pentagon?" she stammered, her bravado evaporating. "Yes, the Pentagon. Naomi confirmed. They take these matters very seriously, especially when they involve discrimination against military personnel. I suggest you prepare yourself for a thorough investigation. The realization of what she had done began to dawn on Karen. Her eyes darted around, noticing for the first time the neighbors watching from their windows and porches. The once cowed residents now wore expressions of grim satisfaction. Within hours, the wheels of military justice began to turn. A team from the Army's Criminal Investigation Division arrived in Oakwood Estates, their presence sending shockwaves through the community. They interviewed residents, collected evidence, and began building a case against Karen. As news of the investigation spread, something remarkable happened. Residents, emboldened by Naomi's stand, began coming forward with their own stories of Karen's abuse. Mark Rodriguez shared how Karen had threatened his daughter over a lemonade stand. Emily Chen recounted feeling like a prisoner in her own home due to Karen's surveillance. The floodgates had opened, and years of pent-up frustration and fear poured out. The investigators' notepads filled with accounts of Karen's reign of terror, frivolous fines, threats, and blatant discrimination. Karen, once the self-proclaimed ruler of Oakwood Estates, found herself isolated and under scrutiny. The HOA board, long cowed by her dominating presence, called an emergency meeting to discuss her removal. As the investigation progressed, the community began to change. Neighbors who had once avoided eye contact now greeted each other warmly. Impromptu gatherings sprang up on lawns and driveways as people shared their experiences and began to rebuild the sense of community that Karen had shattered. With the tables turned, how would Karen face the consequences of her actions, and what changes would this bring to the community? The residents of Oakwood Estates watched with bated breath as justice unfolded before their eyes, daring to hope for a brighter, more inclusive future. The aftermath of Karen's confrontation with Colonel Naomi Campbell sent shockwaves through Oakwood Estates. Within days of the Pentagon's involvement, an emergency HOA meeting was called. The community, once cowed into silence, now spoke with a unified voice. Karen was swiftly removed from her position on the HOA board. As the dust settled, the full extent of Karen's misdeeds came to light. Financial audits revealed years of mismanagement and potential embezzlement. The local authorities, in conjunction with military investigators, launched a comprehensive investigation into Karen's actions. The possibility of criminal charges loomed large, serving as a stark reminder of the consequences of abusing power. The healing process for Oakwood Estates began almost immediately. With Karen's removal, a weight seemed to lift from the community. Neighbors who had once avoided eye contact now greeted each other warmly. Impromptu gatherings sprang up on lawns and driveways as people shared their experiences and began to rebuild the sense of community that had been shattered. This incident served as a powerful reminder of the importance of standing up against injustice. Colonel Campbell's actions demonstrated that one person's courage could inspire an entire community to reclaim their voice. The dangers of unchecked power had been laid bare, and the residents of Oakwood Estates were determined never to let such a situation arise again. The events at Oakwood Estates sparked a wider conversation about HOA governance and accountability. Community members began advocating for greater transparency in HOA operations and stricter oversight of board members. They recognized that community solidarity was not just about shared spaces, but about shared values and mutual respect. To those watching this story unfold, remember, your voice matters. If you see injustice or abuse of power in your own community, speak up. Engage with your neighbors, attend HOA meetings, and hold your board members accountable. Remember that change often starts with one person willing to take a stand. Colonel Naomi Campbell's courage did more than protect her family. It inspired an entire community to reclaim their neighborhood from tyranny. Her actions serve as a beacon of hope for all those facing similar struggles in their own communities. In the end, Oakwood Estates emerged stronger, more united, and with a renewed commitment to fairness and equality. The shadow of Karen's reign had lifted, replaced by the bright promise of a truly inclusive community. And it all began with one woman who refused to be silenced. Please don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe for more.